Politics Midweek Update brought to you by United Fiber and the Courtyard by Marriott. We are here. You're gonna get some opinions today. The most candid man in Missouri politics, John Ratliff. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
You know, we could small talk this, but I don't think you'd enjoy it. So let's just jump in talking about races. This whole concept, I brought in Comvest and Barklage and Aaron Baker and Brett. This concept actually came last cycle, me and you spitball on races. Mm-hmm. And it was so good, and the response was so strong. The whole concept of bringing in political pros is just run down the checklist came because you just crushed doing one of these, the first one. So I'm grateful. Thank you very much for
glad I could
saying what's on your mind.
Do well with that.
So now we're back full circle with you. Let's just start at the top, the governor's race. Tell me where I'm wrong. Everywhere Kehoe's been up on TV, he has closed the gap, or marginally ahead. And if Jay Ashcroft doesn't have the money to be up on TV right now, or he'd be up on TV right now. Mm-hmm. I watched that great ad from General Ashcroft, his father, about facts are stubborn things. And it took me back 20 years to listen to him tell a story. And
probably took you 20 years to listen to the whole spot, but yeah.
Well, that was the kicker. I thought the spot was great. I thought it took me back to being a young man listening. You know, I was a Kid Bond guy, not a John Ashcroft guy. He wasn't the nicest to us younger staffers. However, at the end of this fundraiser, at the end of his talk, he'd tell that story in that voice, and he'd just bring you back around. And I don't care who you were. You could have been voting for the other. You could be a Mel Carnahan staffer. That last 2 minutes of the speech, you heard that gravelly voice story, and he'd bring you in. He was sitting on the back of his truck. Great ad, but it was a minute 15. Yeah, ain't no commercial in minute 15. So everywhere Kehoe's up, Springfield area, he's closed the gap, or maybe even put a little lead in. He's going to win Central Missouri, not because he's lieutenant governor, because he's a car dealer. People liked him. The places I've seen the polling where he's up in some of these less expensive markets, he's closed the gap or winning. Jay Ashcroft, can he get up on TV before the 4th of July right now?
So I think the race has several dynamics. I think one, if anything, that ad proved that the apple's fallen very, very far from the tree.
But when you're U.S. Attorney General, it's a tall tree.
Sure. Yeah, but I didn't try to use that tree to springboard off into my own governorship, right? It's a little bit different. I remember the time my daddy had to come, back me up when I was in kindergarten.
But if you did have Kit Bond's son as your client.
Well, sure. Yeah. Don't get me wrong.
You play the hand you're dealt.
But so I think my citizen year at Boise State, I remember having John Ashcroft come in. This was in 2006. And so he had just got out of being AG. He comes in and gives this speech, and arguably one of the most inspiring speeches I've ever heard at Boise State, or really any political event I've been to. Gave an amazing speech. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago in Cole County at Lincoln Days that both of them, both Jay and Senator Ashcroft, Governor Ashcroft, gave a speech. And I could see that all the things that Jay tries to do and how he falls so miserably short in comparison to his dad. The same jokes, it's just there's an X factor. Obviously, there's an X factor for candidates. There's a difference between those that are highly successful and those that aren't. And that X factor is that John is an authentic, charismatic person, and Jay just fundamentally isn't. So I think that's the first part. I think
I'll defend Jay in one instance. I think Jay Ashcroft is a good person.
Oh, I 100% think he's a good guy.
I think he is now, I also think, in all fairness, I don't think he'd be running for governor at this stage in his life if his name was Ratliff or Faughn.
100%.
I think that's just honestly true. And I think, I bet you if you got Jay Ashcroft alone, he'd cede that point. But the fact is, it's like the governor of Arkansas. Her daddy was governor. Mm-hmm. And she was only running for governor because her daddy was governor. But you know what they call her? They call her governor.
Yeah, we can't all be born on third base. So I get that. And that's good for him. And I think he's
kind of in like the third base batters, or the right-hander batter's box of yeah.
And he's doing his best to see what he can capitalize on that. I think, honestly, Jay will work really hard. He's going to be at everywhere. And everywhere he goes, I think the more voters he meets with, the better Mike Kehoe and Bill Eigel end up doing.
I've seen him get better, though. I mean,
since he first started,
yes,
100%.
Jay Ashcroft has improved on the stump, but neither of them are Bill Eigel on the stump. I mean, Bill Eigel is the best on the stump. Now, Bill Eigel, the message of the Greitens message of burn it down. I don't care if it adds up, but whatever. I'll end your property taxes, and you may be disappointed when you send your kids to school and the bus doesn't pick them up. Because there's no school bus.
Well, the school bus is robbed because there are no police officers there to defend you.
Yeah. Well, but my point is, I mean, Bill, The slash and burn is a little easier. Kehoe and to a lesser extent Ashcroft aren't willing to go there.
I think that's the big difference between both Secretary Ashcroft and Lieutenant Governor Kehoe is that they actually, while I obviously support Mike Kehoe and don't support Secretary Ashcroft, I think both of them are willing to, at least for the most part, they understand they want to be honest with voters and they want to tell them the truth, and they will tell them the hard truths. I think especially Governor Kehoe will always tell you the hard truth, and I think that's something that Bill Eigel has never been able to do. And I think he's running. I mean, Sophia's running an amazing campaign. They are doing a very good job. They're out there. There's nowhere that Bill Eigel's been that Mike Kehoe already hasn't been. But if I was saying who's running the best, just check the box type campaign and kind of doing new things impressively, I would definitely say it's Bill Eigel's campaign. But I also think it's a little easier for them because if you don't have to believe anything you say, and you can just say whatever you want, and voters are like, yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Do I think Bill Eigel believes that he will eliminate personal property? No, I don't think Bill Eigel believes that. Do I think he believes that he will cut them, cap them, do some things? Yeah, I think Bill Eigel does believe that. But you still will get a personal property tax statement if Bill Eigel's governor. But all politics has a little bullshit in it, right?
Yeah, I assume he'll be as effective as a governor, if he ever was governor, as he was a senator, which is completely ineffective.
I disagree with you on that totally.
You can't filibuster your way in the governor's branch. Those are where hard decisions have to be made, and I'm not sure he can pull that off.
I think if Bill Eigel would have ever made Senate leadership, I think if he was ever in charge of something, he would actually surprise you how well he does.
I think you have to. I think politics is relational, and I think you have to have people like you and you have to be able to figure out how to do that. Unless
I think Bill Eigel needs a power element to have a good relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I will say this: he has created power out of nothing, so he's done a fantastic job of doing that. But he didn't do it for sake of accomplishment. He did it for sake of chaos.
Yeah, I mean, come on, man. Everybody wants. There's an element of everybody. Even you, as you know, I respect Caleb Browden. His name is mentioned in these offices in the highest regard only, but there's an element of Caleb Browden. Hey, I want to do this. I played golf with him. He wants to take it on the scramble. He wants to have the winning shot.
Oh yeah, he wants
the ball in the
fourth
quarter.
He does.
And he wanted to be the pro tem because he wanted to be he's the guy. There's an element of his personality, character. And so the same thing in Bill. Bill wanted to be the guy. He couldn't be the guy, so he was the guy that terrorized the guy. I think if Bill Eigel actually was the guy at something, he would do a better job than you'd think.
I wonder if Governor Nixon was the most overridden governor in modern history, I guess, or maybe ever. And I think if God forbid Bill Eigel ever became governor, I would say today, I bet he would be the most overridden Republican governor in history.
Totally. I mean, Nixon was overridden because a bunch of partisan stuff that was goofy. That included a bunch of line item budgets, things in there for Nixon. I think Eigel.
I would love for a guy to try to propose a budget to us who never voted for a budget in his time in the General Assembly.
I think Eigel will be the most overridden governor by his own party.
Oh, yeah. That's what I mean.
Okay. I'm with you on that. But the bare bones of the race, how much money does Bill Eigel need to be? Right now, I feel like Bill was this insurgent in the fourth quarter. It stalled a little. I feel like Bill, there's just simply a amount of money or a last name in lieu of money. You have to ante up to the main table. I feel like Bill is a half step back still from the main table of those top two candidates. How much money does he need to be right there with Ashcroft Kehoe?
So I think he does have to our point, while I think it's a false message, I do think he has a winning message. And so if he's able to get that out, I think that's important. And you and I have been talking before, and I've heard a lot of rumors out there. And if the trial attorneys I always say, billionaires, when they get tired of buying planes and jets and whatever else, football teams, maybe they could buy a governor's race. And we saw that in 2016 when we were forced to deal with Crichtons for 18 months or however long it was. 17 months. I still have the flag in my house. But so 17 months, I think that's a similar situation we have to be worried about here. Does an out-of-state billionaire try to come in and help buy this race for Bill Eigel? And that should be a really big concern. And I think even with the few $100,000 of actual hard dollars of voter contact dollars, he's put together a very effective campaign. And so we should all, those of us who actually want government to work, obviously small government, but government to work, we should be very afraid for a scenario in which Bill Eigel gets $2.5 million. And I think that could be, that's only 2,000 points of TV.
Well, he's got $1.5 million, doesn't he, on hand with his PAC? And
No, I think he's raised a bunch, but he loses 85% of it or 90% of it. He gets all this money from these old ladies that he's convinced is Donald Trump, and then he takes all their money away. And so that goes. He's making a firm out there a lot of money.
Well, yes, I thought that was a little shady. Of course, I think everyone did. Mostly, probably Donald Trump might have thought that. I'm not.
He put that tweet out right after the conviction.
My favorite part was when he would, and this is just politics. Trust me, if you think Bill Eigel is the only one that does this, Bill's just better at it than the guys you like that's actually doing it. The only reason you don't know, he's like, oh, the swamp, these halls are a trail. That he was saying that on like Thursday. And then on Monday, he's like, hey, Swamp, I like some of that money. You might. And that's that. If you think that's just Bill Eigel, you're a fool. That is every politician that's ever said the word swamp. They have the wettest feet in town. They'll say swamp on May 15th, but on May 25th, it's Mr. Swamp Monster. I'd sure like some of that money. That swamp sure is green, and that money sure is green. I'd sure like some.
I did like that video because you can clearly tell that one of his staffers, Lemke or someone, is sitting on the floor and he looks straight down the barrel of the camera from the Senate floor, telling them that he's doesn't want their money. So I did respect the game.
But I mean, he doesn't want their money like that hour.
Mm-hmm.
But the next and trust me, if you think whoever you love, right, whoever is the sun sets with, thinks if you've ever said the word swamp, it is the funniest thing. If you wonder why a lot of people in the room chuckle, it's because they're on the phone to that swamp. Like, give me some of that, please. That green swamp money.
So to answer your question,
he needs $2 million.
I think a few $1 million, depending on when he gets it.
Well, that ain't
$2 million. I think $2.5 million at the end of the campaign.
He can do more with less, right?
Because the question is, from a strategic perspective, it's kind of like the rope-a-dope strategy that we had to employ for Senator Fitzwater to win. We knew we were going to have a lot of money, and it's kind of, or I call it the rope-a-dope, or it's the 300 strategy, where you take the resources you have and you shrink it where there's not enough time left to make a difference. So hopefully, the Keogh side, which was obviously the side I'm on, the Keogh side is aware of this, or the Ashcroft side, and are cognizant of the scenario in which Eigel could catch fire, and so they're already prepared to stomp him out before he catches fire. I think if the amount of ammo that's going to go downrange on Ashcroft could ever start to go downrange on Eigel, then that's the ball game. But if Eigel can get towards the end of the campaign when Keogh's fighting two battles, well, then it's a much different ball game.
So go back to there's a date in this, and I'm gonna try to see if you have time to come on in June. Right now, Lincoln Huff just made a major Springfield TV buy. Mm-hmm. The TV buys are starting to be made. You have governor, the AG race. You have a guy with unlimited money in that. You've got a couple. We get to lieutenant governor, a couple legit rich dudes in that. At what point, though, if Bill Eigel got a $2 million check on June 20th, he could make a legit buy. That's not an issue. He gets a $22 million check on July 15th. What date in July is it hard to make buys and get you want the KSDK news. You want, KSHB 41, NBC in Kansas City. At what point are those bought? That inventory gone?
Well, inventory is never bought. You can always buy. Just the rate cards. So you have 3 tiers of rate buying. And so you just buy the highest rate. And if it ever, for some reason, buys out, they can just turn over. I remember in 2016, the rate cards in Columbia and Kansas City just kept getting turned over. And it was just like the Yahtzee board flopped over and you start all over again. So they won't ever be bought out completely. So
they'll just move Mockins forward to the Wednesday after the election.
Yeah, or you just pay more for a spot. I remember getting a phone call in one cycle where they said, hey, we have a 30-second spot. It's $16,000 or 3 people behind you. Do you want it? And I said, no, I don't want it. And so that's always a scenario. It'll cost a lot more to get a lot less. And so that's definitely a risk. And I think voters are already getting to a point now when we've really not even started the political advertising season that they're starting to check out. It's been a long run with all the trials at the federal level and everything else. They're kind of over all that.
And it's really never stopped. Trump never let it stop.
Yeah, and so people are kind of already a little bit exhausted. But I think there's 2 different scenarios. There's the governor's race and attorney general's race, which is voters look at a lot differently. Because there's so many more resources, so it can tell a longer story.
They know what they do. Yeah.
Down ballot ones, whether it's lieutenant governor, secretary of state, treasurer, whatever, those offices, lieutenant governor, if I didn't say that, those offices, they get a lot less interest. They're just slightly above the interest of a state rep or state senate, and sometimes even less than that. And so there's a disconnect there. And so what the strategy you'd employ for those down ballot races is different than what you're going to do for a governor's race or attorney general's race. And so again, from an Eigel's perspective, depending on how you get towards the end, it's about right now for $800,000, you can buy basically 1,000 points of TV statewide. But But what you shouldn't do is view a strategic campaign won't say, I got to buy everywhere. That's the mistake that a lot of people make. It's that maybe I only need to buy, where's my base at? And so I'm Bill Eigel, and I've seen the polling, and maybe I'm actually really strong in the Bible Belt of the 7th of Southwest Missouri. So I'm going to do 500 points of media down here, then I'm going to move over. And I think the Boot Hill's up for grabs for anyone. So I'm going to try to grab that, or I have a chance in the Kansas City markets where, the 7th is the Springfield DMA is the most efficient.
When do you think those rate cards get into where it gets prohibitive to buy?
I imagine.
What's the date?
I imagine almost the beginning of July, you're going to be buying top tier. Very, very likely, because if this governor's race, and especially the AG's race, right? I learned the hard way in 16 that when DC wants something, DC and wherever else will put in all the money in the world to get what they want. And so I think that is a fear that those of us on hopefully the winning side of the AG campaign are aware of and have to be prepared for, is the onslaught from, New York money and DC money coming in and try to buy our attorney general's race.
Let's get to that. So give me right now, is Kehoe closed the gap in Springfield up a little bit, but he's had, because he's been up, 7 weeks now? He's been up on Springfield TV.
They've been hemorrhaging money.
Kansas City's up, a little SEMO buy.
Yeah, I think they're going to use it. I think they've got a great team over there with obviously Axiom and with Barklage kind of moving all the strings over there. I think if I could pick 2 people over there to do it, I wouldn't pick better than David and Jeff, obviously, to kind of figure out a path there to chart from a statewide perspective. So I think they're going to do a good.
How much money does Ashcroft need to say? To me, if he's going to come up, if he can give up the money in June, right, or at the end of June or early July, if he's got a lead, then he feels good, right? I think
he's banking on Club coming in to support him, is what I believe. He's hoping the Club's going to come in and save him, like so many other politicians in Missouri right now.
Well, do you think that happens?
I think they've got a lot of races they're looking at, so I don't know if he ranks towards the top. He's got some people on there that are close with him that are obviously influential in the Club world, and I think that's what he's hoping on getting. But I think that he has to show that he can win.
If I'm Bill Eigel, aren't I saying the same prayers to the same guys in Washington?
I think the MATA dollars cause a problem for him there.
Yeah, and he is mad. He's
100%.
He's locked in on, I'm pursuing you, or however you want to. I'm for the little guy getting the woke corporations or whatever it would be. He's been there legislatively, not just rhetorically.
Yeah, I will say that the trial attorney Republicans here, like Eigel and them, the Democrats should be most mad at them than anybody else, because they've sucked up so many of their dollars over the last 8 years and kept them from playing.
How do you say it's not been a very?
No, it's great
strategy
for them. It's for the Democrats. They should be upset because those are dollars they could have been spending beating us in other places, right?
So give me a prediction. I know you're working for Kehoe. What's Kehoe win by?
I think it's a very close race. I think it will break, so I think it wins by 4.
It breaks and he wins by 4.
Mm-hmm.
What if he wins by 4? What does Eigel get?
I think Eigel has as good a chance of not being in second place right now. I would not be surprised if it's Kehoe, Eigel, Ashcroft, and Ashcroft is sitting basically where he's at.
Yeah, let's talk about Lieutenant Governor. You got Huff putting together a hell of a war chest.
Mm-hmm.
Are you with Rader?
With Lincoln.
Then you've got Senator Rader, talented, probably the most talented politician in the crew, but doesn't have the money that you need. Then you got Porter. Tell me what you know about him.
I think sounds like a very wealthy individual out of St. Louis who has some interesting positions on the environment and some policies that I don't think would do very well in rural Missouri, especially farmers. I think would have a unique take on his positions. But so he's got sounds like he has the ability, or from what I've heard, to write a decent 7-figure check. Could he give himself a few million, maybe? That
rarely works.
No, it gets you from a down ballot race. It gets you in the conversation, right?
But name me the guy that came in at the statewide level, wrote himself a big check and won. I'm trying to think. I'm probably gonna be embarrassing when somebody texts me here and says, "Oh, well,
statewide." No, I will say that a lot of our congressional races come down to your ability to do that, and that balls out, helps you a lot from that perspective. I think we've seen. I think there's sometimes a fatal flaw in those that are willing to write that check are then poor at asking other people for
Well,
resources.
they've never done it. And also, you know, if I put $1 million in, you could give me $5,000 of your money when I just put $1 million into mine.
Some people,
I think there's some
you can get to match or like believe in it, like from a business to business, but it's this disconnect. And we saw it with, you know, I think John Bruner was a great guy, and he put in so much of his own money, and he would have been an amazing governor, but it was always the just enough and never enough more, right? And sometimes if you're going to try to buy a seat, you got to
just buy it.
Yeah, and so I think that's
Wassinger. Here's the thing. I think Wassinger's a smart guy. Probably has more natural ability to campaign than most, but I've seen this before. The guy comes in, writes his check. He doesn't understand the political world. He thinks everybody's out to take advantage of him. But this time, I think in 2018 he was embarrassed that he lost. I don't think he quite respected his opponent, and I think he was surprised. And I think he didn't spend his money. And I think at the end of the day, he wouldn't have got in this race if he wasn't going to spend his money.
Yeah, I think he put that, $1 million, $1.5 million in. So I think he's got a starting point there.
But he's got to spend it. Like, I don't think anybody's going to believe that you're going to spend your $1.5 million when you didn't spend your $500,000 last time. You're going to have to spend that money to get anybody to take you seriously.
Well, he's laid a buy-in. That doesn't mean he's pot committed, but he has laid a buy-in. And so I think he is, I would assume from a Lincoln perspective that he is going to spend that money, and probably, you know, I would assume that he's probably got another $1 million more he's going to put in.
Okay, what's it cost to get your name out in a down ballot race?
So $800,000 is 1,000 points TV. That's one bite at the apple. So the X factor in these down ballots is because you're never going to be able to be the loud enough voice in the room when it comes to any other statewide, right? All the ads that Keogh's already done, all the ads that's going to happen in the AG's race, and then every other person. Not to mention we got a couple congressional races, or at least a congressional race is going to spend a bunch of money. Then all these state senate primaries are going to spend a bunch of money. And so you're just one more ad on top is not going to be enough to break through. And the reality is, even if you have $3 million to buy 3 statewide TV ads in, you know, very generic view of the world, you're still not enough in that moment just to break through. And so what becomes important at that point are the little X factor things. And so it's the endorsements you get from the soybean guys and the FOP and the firefighters. And why that matters, it's not because it's going to be on an ad and just saying, well, I got the FOP endorsement. It's what do those individual grassroots organizations choose to put forward for you? And when they're sitting out there in railings, and most of those groups that are endorsing Kehoe have also endorsed Lincoln in these races. And so you'll see that I believe those grassroots organizations knows what's at stake, and they're going to be communicating directly with their members over and above what we're going to be putting on TV and radio and anything else. So I think that's part of it.
Lincoln just buy the race? If he gets to 4, can he buy it?
No, because I think the other guys will be too close. You have to be able. You got to have like 3-1 or 4-1 money, and we're not going to have that in this race.
So if you're Lincoln and you have, let's say you have $4 million, you can run 3 of your own. Do you take that other and do you hit whoever polls next to you?
Well, it's not necessary. It's definitely a whack-a-mole game, right?
Yeah.
And so he's not going to do 3,000 points of TV just on how great Lincoln Huff is. He might do 2 to 2.5, and then do the last bit is going to be punching or whack-a-mole on both of them. But again, like I said, it's not I'm going to go and buy 1,000 points of TV statewide. It's I need to buy markets and be more strategic at how I'm doing that. So where's Lincoln's base? Where can we grow? Where can be more efficient? Where does his different interest groups?
What I always see happen, especially with the rich guys, is you'll see, Holly Rader, there is a value to running for office and winning and going to the chicken dinners. There's a value to that. Yep. You pick up experience. You get better at your craft. Holly Rader is very good at her craft. She's had experience the other two rich guys just haven't been able to have in life. Wassinger a little bit because he has actually ran once. His wife has ran, but Porter coming in totally fresh. What I watched, what was that old Spider-Man cartoon where they're all dressed as Spider-Man pointing at each other?
Oh, yeah.
I always find in these multi-candidate races, you go to bed at night dreaming, okay, if I'm Porter, Wassinger's going to hit Huff. He's going to knock him down. Then I'm going to put all my money into me and I'm going to win. And Wassinger goes to sleep and think, oh, that Porter guy's going to save. He's going to hit Huff and I'll run. And in the end, nobody ever hits him.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a game of whack-a-mole there. And so you got to be.
Or nobody whacks any moles.
So I would be surprised if the consultants on the other side of the other races, if they aren't going to try to attack just because it's like they can't help themselves. They have to attack. They can't bring themselves to say nice things about their own client. They can only say mean things about someone else's. And so I think that is, for some of these guys, is what's going to happen one way or the other. I love Holly. I did a lot of Holly's campaigns in the past, and I think she's going to work really hard. The X factor is, can she ever get enough money to be relevant in this race? And I don't know if that's going to be the case or not.
So you're working for Hub. Give me a prediction on how this race turns out.
I think it's a three-way jump ball between Wassinger, Lincoln, and Porter, and I think it will likely be extremely close, because I think all three of them are going to have almost or about the same amount of money, and then it comes down to who.
I don't count Holly out quite that.
If she gets,
I mean, I get how you're saying. I get your analogy. I'm not. It's logical. I just feel like that she's got some people she can call on to put together some money.
And if those
I think
dollars
she needs
come
less
in,
money.
I don't know. I think every elected official, state rep, state senate especially, think that everyone knows them and loves them. And I will say that Holly's got a little bit of name ID, but it cuts, both sides. I think the other X factor people got to be mindful of this cycle is looking at these different markets. And I think Democrats are getting smart. And I think it's I would laugh when the other consultants say all the Democrats are going to vote for me and that's how I'm going to win. I don't think that has historically been the case, and I don't think it's going to be a huge X factor.
Have you ever actually seen it happen? I've never seen it happen.
I think I've seen crossover votes, and so the real X factor is looking at, or the difference maker is the votes, those who vote perfectly in a primary or in a general election but never vote in a primary that are still Republican, and finding ways to communicate with those voters and getting them to show up in some of these races. And I think a lot of campaigns are going to be doing that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, because the data is getting easier to sort and do.
I imagine any race that we're a part of, we know exactly what that number is.
Here's the Secretary of State's race. This is why I was glad you're in here today. Okay, so I saw early on, I thought the ethics stuff was he screwed up his expenses. Then I'm like, the rest of this is a staffer game of staffers maybe thinking it came down to who runs the place. Folks get elected or folks that are staffers. And all of it has surprised me. I guess I'm just a naive hillbilly. I like Dana Rademan. The person I knew, right? I lost track of her. I don't want to oversay that. I talk to her all the time, especially the last, really since Todd left. But I've always respected her and liked her. I think it got odd. It got weird. I think Hannah was kind of doing the bidding of some folks, probably namely her. But okay, fine. I kind of thought, well, Dana thinks she's right. I didn't see it. And they all will tell you, well, there's things you don't know. Well, of course, by definition, you don't know things you don't know. I got it it just got weird. It got very weird. And then this lawsuit comes up. And I got to say, I'm taken aback by the lawsuit. Dana does a job that she's very well compensated for by any Central Missouri standards of $160,000 with benefits you'd only hope for and pensions. And
I think one of the highest paid people in the building.
Yeah, good for her. I mean, that's she's negotiated that. I'm on my get what you're worth and then get more, right? But I think it's hard to convince somebody flipping pizza dough at Harris Pizza today or out at Unilever making soap that you make 160 and you work very hard for 5 months, extremely hard. You don't break your neck the other 7. I'm not saying you do nothing to sue. And the thing she's suing over, I have a hard time with their past believing Dana's truly afraid of Rod. Something in that, as a person who was around in 2007, I don't think she's always been afraid of Rod. Then I saw in the lawsuit they called Sarah Walsh stupid. Well, I'm sorry. Lots of people have called their coworkers stupid, right? I'm sorry. Kelton, God knows when I leave a room is like, that's stupid hillbilly. I mean, you can admit it, Kelton. No, put the Kelton cam on because I want to see everyone see you when you say this. You've called me dumb before. Brady and you, Jarrett, you have. It's okay. Admit it.
Sometimes.
See, I knew it. And I get it. We blow off a little steam. We say that. And Sarah Walsh she's a nice person. But Dean Placker would not be the only person at Capitol who ever thought she was dumb. Then I read it looked like I read the complaint. It looked like a Festivus party for House staffers, like the airing of the grievances. And then I saw you and whatever folks think of you, whether you've beat them in a race or you've said something chippy to them or whatever, there's a generation of staff people throughout the legislative process and the political process that owe some favor to you for getting there. And I happen to believe, I'm not going to say I know, but I believe that that I believe that there is a piece of this that you have helped Kenny when he was like, I don't know Kenny Ross that well at all. Just somebody I just never really you were probably part of. I don't think people get hired by Caleb Rowden without you having some input on that decision. It was a very advantageous thing for him. Took grief in the house.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit of an FU to the house to what he did. And I have a hard time believing he would have done it on the same day without you. Then I read in the lawsuit that Dana filed a private conversation with you and Kenny. I have to think you were a little surprised by that. It felt like you were done dirty there.
Yeah, well, so I would say is a couple of things. I learned a long time ago in politics that there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And so I think that something it takes to be reminded of a lot, I think, in this business, and you try to let it roll off your shoulder. So I think you were very familiar with this, but there's an incident several years ago or a few years ago in which a staff person was let go, and I looked back at probably all the mistakes I've made in my political career, the things that I should have done differently or should have fought harder for. And in that moment, a staffer was let go, and I don't think I did a good enough job as both a friend and as like the employee or employer to have taken care of that or fought back against it. And so I made that mistake. And going into this moment, there's another situation in which all the details of what happened in the building and the different staff, I think I 100% believe that people that have been in that building, whether it's Dana or Kenny or anybody else, you set in those jobs for a long time, you kind of become, it's your job, and everyone else's kind of flows through. And I think even from a political staffer perspective, that kind of comes in. I think that dynamic has definitely been developed there, and that was part of it. Obviously, I've had my differences of opinions over the years with Dana, just from as a political staffer to an official staffer, and how I want the building to work to help me win more races. But I would say, first, don't believe everything you read in the funny papers. I think if we learned anything from the 7-month-long witch hunt that we saw through the ethics process against Speaker Plocker, we saw that people are willing to say or do more or less anything to try to push their narrative. And I think we saw that definitely happen in the case with the chief clerk. She, for whatever reason, she had a bone to pick with the speaker and was never going to let it go. It was like a dog on a bone. It was just no chance she was backing off anything. And she just
and that's odd to me, because Dean, if anything, is a little soft. I was going to say, like, if I had to pick, if I was Goldilocks and I was eating the porridge and I was going to criticize, I would say he's too cold and too hot. It's odd to me you'd have that big a beef with Dean.
Yeah, that's my experience with Dean. Look, Dean and I have disagreed from time to time on a variety of things, but he's never been the kind of person you can't, like, he's just a good guy. I think I got in trouble on your show for calling him a meathead, so I shouldn't say that again.
Well, but it's a lovable one.
But what I would say is that he's
George W. Bush-ish type.
Yeah, he's a genuinely good guy. Again, I don't always agree with him, but he's a genuinely good guy. And so I found everything that happened, that whole process was just a kind of a disgusting process. It shouldn't have happened that way. I was really disappointed in the body, in the committee, and just the way we went about that. And I was actually,
at the end of the day, he was vindicated.
Yeah, 100%.
He was dismissed.
And so because they didn't get him there, the swamp, as we like to call it now, the swamp, the bureaucracy can't seem to let go. And so now they're on to this. This is their next thing. So again, and specifically to what was in the article, I love, the quality
Let me just put you on the spot. I call you the most candid man in Missouri Politics for a reason. If I were you, I would have felt a little let down that my private conversation was put in, not Kenny Ross's lawsuit, someone else's lawsuit. He intentionally gave up your conversation after you'd done him a pretty big favor. So I felt a little hurt. Were you hurt by that?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One, fidelity must not be something that's strong in that family. And then two, I don't think I have a lot more colorful language than what was used in there. So I don't know if I ever said Dana Gate. I feel like I would have said a lot worse things, but sure.
That's not even that big a deal. I mean, honestly.
But either way, I don't care. Yeah. Like my job is to
I don't think calling something Dana Gate's anything wrong with that.
But I think what they did was disgusting. I think she should really reconsider if she is best serving the people of Missouri in the House, and I don't think she is. And honestly, I have no say in it, but I don't think she should be there at all. Like, I think there's the whole crew over there in that building right now that we learned through this process care more about themselves than they do about the institution and about the people.
Is that on the fault of the legislators, though?
Well, I think we learned that these rules that have been in place for a long time.
Which is the fault of the
Oh
legislators?
yeah, the rules have been put in place to empower the staff to be over the legislators. And I always say,
who hires the staff? Who does a staff person? So
Oh, yeah.
Chad Perkins, a buddy of mine, who's his staff person work for?
For Dana.
So I don't. You could ask 5 people, you're going to get 6 different answers.
Oh, yeah, it shouldn't be that way, but that's what the rules say.
That's
So
idiotic.
I think that is a big problem. I always tell candidates, like, look, I'm going to give you the best piece of advice, but at the end of the day, your name is on the ballot, not mine. You're the one who stepped forward, and so I'm going to tell you what I think you should do. But at the end of the day, you're the boss. You make the decision. And that mentality on the campaign side is not what I think exists on the official side in the building right now. And I think that's a problem. I think that Speaker-elect Patterson and the rest of the leadership team that's coming in, I think they understand that. I think the members understand that we're aware of the problems that we had. And I think going forward are probably going to fix that, which I think is good, because whether we like what our elected officials do all the time or not doesn't necessarily matter. At the end of the day, they were voted to be in charge, and they should be in charge. But to your question again, I'm not surprised based off the actions that have happened since myself and Senator Rowden and a bunch of others tried to be helpful in what we've seen since then. So I'll say that.
I would have been. There's a difference in pissed off and hurt. I think I had my feelings hurt a little bit by that if I were you.
So how it works.
Let's talk about the politics of it. If I'm Dean Plucker, my message a year ago was I agree with those other white guys. I just might have a better haircut. Now he actually has something interesting to say. I think the lawsuit was a great gift to him. I mean, she's suing the state of Missouri. I don't know that many people are going to have that much sympathy for you. And there may be more things. And again, I go back to, it's hard for me to say that because the person that I've known, and I do think this is sad, and you may not have the same sympathy anymore, and I'd respect that, but it's a long service to the state, a long career serving the House. I'm afraid this is what she'll be remembered for, and I think that's unfortunate, and I think she deserves better. But if I'm Dean, why the hell isn't Dean out saying, okay, the liberals couldn't beat me at the ballot box. The swamp, I beat them 7-2 in the legislature. Now they're doing just like the Trump. They're taking me to court. I've been in southern Missouri the last week. Donald Trump is the greatest, most beloved person ever, even more than Flat Doug. I don't know why he's not out there saying, you're damn right, this is them coming at me again, just like Trump. I'm frankly, the political ineptness of it, if you want to take out Dean Plucker, dragging him to court the same day they convicted Trump of, I'm not even sure what the hell they convicted Trump of. Why the hell ain't Dean Plucker out there calling? What did Denny Hoskins do today? No one cares either. Dean Plucker could have the initiative. Why the hell isn't he using it?
Yeah, so I would say from a stagecraft perspective, we couldn't have honestly coordinated it any better if we wanted to. And so I think that was it. I think they thought, because they're not good at politics and probably because they're all pretty liberal, that they think by the same liberals who think they have beaten Trump are the same liberals who probably now think they're going to use this to beat Plucker. And if anything, it's going to only further help elect them. So I would imagine that any of the media that's going to come forward when we start talking about the stories, when some of those voter contact comes out, I think this is definitely going to be part of that conversation. And if anything, to your point, I think what has transpired over the last 7 months and what's happened now, unlike everybody else's campaign, or I'm going to make sure we have elections integrity and we're going to paper ballots and all the same 5 check boxes. We have a story that, just like President Trump, we have fought the swamp in Jeff City. We took on the bureaucracy. We beat them. Now they're using lawfare to come after us here, just like President Trump. And I'm going to take this same mentality, the same things that I've done fighting them in the General Assembly, and I'm going to move over to the election to the Secretary of State's office and make sure that we're going to clean up the bureaucracy over there.
Dean Plucker going to go? Is he going to owe Dana a beer when this is over, when he's Secretary of State?
We'll make sure we send her a signed copy from his desk in the Kirkpatrick building.
I'm not sure there's not some logical direct tie to that. Let's talk about other people in the race, though. Mary Elizabeth Coleman, very talented. I have not seen a lot of the campaign part of this yet. She was running for Congress, seen a lot out of her there. Haven't seen a lot of campaign stuff for Secretary of State. But if I'm you and I'm working for Dean, I'm worried about her. She has the ability to put together a very credible campaign quickly.
Yeah, I think Mary Elizabeth has proven she's a very talented senator, and I thought that I was honestly surprised she jumped into this race. I kind of thought she was going to jump lieutenant governor's race at first. Now looking at all the money's over there, maybe she picked a better race to be in. But I also thought that when she decided not to run for Congress, that maybe she was going to just say, I want to focus on my Senate career for a bit and come back in a few years. So I was
But that's an
surprised.
advantage she has that nobody else does.
Yes, it's free pass.
Dean Blocker can go to lobbyists. That lobbyist says, well, your secretary says they don't really care about that. Mary Elizabeth, you almost give her money and hope she loses.
Yeah, I think that helps a little bit. The problem is down ballot. Is every down ballot candidate is starting to learn. It's fairly hard to raise money in an office that most of the Jeff City Swamp doesn't actually care about, and so that makes it a little bit more challenging. They're making a longer term investment in you at that point. So I think that's a bit. I do think MEC has the ability to go out and meet with voters. She has, a specific message that I think could resonate with voters.
Mike Carter's a fun guy. He can do this almost for sport.
I think he's ran for office for like a decade now of a sport or more.
But he's got the money to do it like a professional sport. You know?
Yeah.
I'd say Mike Carter will spend the second most money in this race. Could be the first, but my gut tells me the second most money in this race. I could see.
I think I've received 3 or 4 texts from him already.
Yeah, he's working that text thing.
Yeah.
Then you got Adam Schwadron. Gonna need a little more money, right? Before he's in that top tier people talked about.
Yeah, he's raised a little bit, I think he is definitely understands the issue, is going to go out and try to talk about like the truth. Him and a secretary or a clerk controller is going to try to have like a conversation on being Secretary of State, which is great and noble, but that's not what works in today's politics because people don't care.
Shane Schuler, though, let me just say, if you've been in Southwest Missouri, your old hometown, anybody that's ever been to a chicken dinner with Shane Schuler, he's been there, and you like him. He's the most honest guy. He's a great guy. There's a path now when the field blew up. I'm not sure Shane had a path in a one-on-one 3-person race. In a larger field, that's better for Shane. He's got a base down there.
If he can get enough money, right? Because people you always assume he has. You're hoping that he has some residual from Forever Ghost when he ran in 12, and then being. It's not as if he's spending a couple $100,000 every 4 years to be reelected as county clerk. I would be surprised if he spends $10,000. And so just because you're in office doesn't mean you have this strong base of support of residual name ID. You don't. We see that all the time from state reps who've been reelected for 8 years, and the last time they campaigned was their first primary to get elected. They did nothing for 8 years. They went to all the events, did all that stuff. Then they try to jump to the state senate, and at best they're at 4 or 5% name ID, if even that. So it doesn't always translate. So do that. Again, the 7th Congressional is the most efficient media market. So if Shane was able to put up enough money to go down there and campaign, he could remind them and hope to tell a story that maybe he could lock down the 7th and hope that the race is split far enough that he could shoot the gap. I don't believe that's going to happen. But
Valentina Gomez is funny.
She is. I get texts all the time from my friends around the country who are like, is this your client? I was like, no chance. No chance.
I think she's funny. Let's talk about the treasurer's race. Lori Rook, it looks like she's spending some of that money.
Yeah, I've started to see. I see her ads on social media. I've seen a couple of her billboards. Yeah, we're with Cody.
So it feels like Koenig, Andrew is a good dude. It's gonna be hard to raise money.
He's knocking doors, he's a power door knocker. I'm just not sure you can knock enough doors to win a statewide campaign.
Well, if you can though, and
he's all over it too. He's in random places because I get a text like, I think Koenig knocked my door today, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Oh, cool.
Well, good for him.
I think he's like doing jobs, and he just kind of, when he's in a job, like has 2 hours and stops and hits doors in a neighborhood. It's cool. I mean, it's a very Koenig strategy of like, he's going to work his butt in the ground.
Kind of little Mr. Smith goes to Washington about it. Cody Smith, how much money is he going to have?
I think there's a lot. I mean, right now they're all trying to put the dollars together. Who's going to write these big checks are supposed to come in here at the end. I think there's a lot of big pending dollars out there for that race. I believe that it's because I think that
I had a buddy that did that job once. You don't do anything in that job.
Well, I think you do manage part of the ESA program, I believe.
But like they're all just going to say, lobbyists, what do we do today, including Vivek?
Yeah, I think they care. They care about that bit. That's an important part for them.
But I mean,
and I think they also
all of it is do whatever they want
on the MHTC board. So
yeah, how do you? Vivek's banking money like no one's business. I mean,
he's a good guy.
How much money does Cody? If Vivek Malik has $4 million, how much money does Cody Smith need to beat him? I know it's not 4, but what is it?
I mean, I think if it was $1 million, he could beat him.
Really? Let's talk about where we're at the AG. Can you come back maybe next week and talk state senate races?
Sure.
AG race. You've got Harvard versus the hero, legitimate war hero, and Andrew Bailey. If you're a right winger, I don't know who he needs to sue to make you happy. Sue them all. I think there's a thirst for someone. I have a friend that used to be from Ladue that loves anybody that's never done anything in Missouri politics. And and Will Sharp has I think you've seen infinite money to do whatever he needs to do. His story was maybe the worst story I could ever paint. You're from New York. You went to Harvard with all those freaks and idiots. Then you worked for the Department of Justice, which is the biggest, crime syndicate in the world.
The Biden Department of Justice. Yeah.
Well, either one. I don't. You could tell me they're different. I don't see any difference. I think I think if you could deal with the Colombian drug lords or the Department of Justice, as far as honesty and integrity, Colombian drug lord all day, not even a judgment call. But then, so you come out of that, but then you're Trump's lawyer. But so let me ask you this question: you're Trump's lawyer. You've been all over CNN talking about how you're Trump's lawyer. You've got this. We're going to win this case. Then you get your ass kicked. Does that rub off on him?
I think I'm hopeful that he doesn't get Trump's endorsement, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if he does. And I think there's enough.
Trump said he likes winners. Well, ain't nobody in that fucking lawsuit winners on his side.
And so I think there's a scenario in which there's like a Trump endorsement in certain races will be like, that's the definition. That's all that matters. That's the game changer. Some it's going to get you to a certain level. And then like you get that base. And I think the two of them are both equally solidified with the Trump electorate to some degree. So it's how they break either way. I think it's really hard to take, and I think probably going to see some spots pretty soon to do this, take the resume and the narrative of Scharf, what you talked about, and then that of Bailey, what Bailey was doing when he was in college versus what Scharf was doing.
Will Scharf wants to talk about what Will Scharf has done the last 100 days of his life and nothing before. Andrew Bailey wants to talk about his entire life.
Yep.
I mean, adopting children, being a legit war hero, going to Mizzou, being a prosecutor, not for the Department of Justice, for actual real prosecutors, like for folks that break into your house at night.
I hear people from Bailey all the time, or from like grassroots groups say, hey, can you get this person to come get this person? Hey, can you get Bailey to come speak? He is like the best speaker we've heard on the circuit forever. Everyone loves to hear Andrew stand up and like to his gravelly voice and like give this speech that is very inspiring, gets everybody kind of motivated and like wants to charge a hill. Clearly what he did when he was in the military. And so I think everyone is very impressed with Andrew. Now it comes down to, as I said earlier in the conversation, how much money is spent.
What's the ratio? So if Will Sharp has $10 million, you have to have half that money. Do you have to have 2/3 that money? What do you have? I think
he needs at least have probably 2/3 to be able to. You can't. We learned last time we got outspent 4-1 and 6-1 the last week. 4-1 overall, 6-1 the last week. And we just couldn't be loud enough, right? And so you have to be loud enough. And I think so long as it's back to that 300 strategy, if they get close enough to the end where there's only so much bandwidth left to buy, there's only so much, like you can keep buying, there's only just so much spots left total.
Yeah.
That I don't know how, if Andrew can stay in the fight for that long and be able to still be there, then I think that's how he wins. And I think that's obviously part of a strategy. Now it's how much can New York and other places throw in to try to buy this seat. And I think there are Missourians, not New Yorkers, not Washington, D.C. people, but New Yorker or Missourians who want this race as bad as the out-of-state people do.
Number one, I've never seen a candidate. I've never seen him knocked for being totally paid for by the East Coast. I've never seen Missouri voters penalize you for being totally non-Missouri funded or supported. I think they'll totally buy and not care that all the money comes from Will's dad and his
it's the loudest voice. Yeah.
I mean, they don't care.
But I think there's an authenticity level there. And
will Missourians match the East Coast? Can Missouri take on Manhattan?
I think this race will be the definition of that. We saw last time the answer was no. I think this time we learned our lesson from 8 years ago. And I think if we have a fighting chance of doing it, is with Bailey this time.
It's the most interesting race to me on the ballot. Speaking of, I want to thank our friends at United Fiber. If you're watching this in Northwest Missouri, it's because the folks at United Fiber run a hell of an operation. And look, if you're going to stay somewhere, you bring kinfolks in. You don't put kinfolks anywhere but one spot, right?
Courtyard by Marriott.
I mean, the Courtyard's a place to go. I got to thank my buddy Chad. Look at this elephant. I had that when you came on here. He's actually from Ashland. And he, so I was like, well, there's one guy that's elected more Boone County Republicans than anybody I know. I've actually Googled to try to find a rhino one.
Yeah, it's like it should be a rhino.
I mean, I'd love to have, if you're out there, I'm so grateful to everybody. Like my buddy, when this came in, I was going to wait for Charisma or Keller to be on. This a talent for governor hat, the prized possession of mine. I got to find somewhere to put this up in here. But what would be even more prized, even more than my Jerry Litton plate that I got from a buddy of mine in Chillicothe. Look at that. You talk about, this was what a Republican, if he was today, he would be Mike Kehoe. He'd be the leading Republican. This guy was their pro-life, pro-ag, pro-business guy, great guy, legend in Chillicothe. Would have been a U.S. senator. He died on election night. A great book out there. You can read about him. But what I'd really love to have, if any of you are so nice, or even if you find one, tell me where to go, and I'm happy to pay for it. I need a rhino Stein, and at double points, if the horn sticks out from the thing, that'd be even greater. Thank you all for watching. I think we'll be back tomorrow, Kelton. Want to do this again tomorrow?
Sure.
And John, you come back next week to talk Senate races.
Yep.
The statewide stuff just got too interesting. So we appreciate you all. We'll see you Sunday, but I think we'll see you tomorrow here for This Week in Missouri Politics.